I'm going to talk about authentication, but before I do, I want to show you guys something kind of cool. That changed the apple color of blue. All right. I don't know how many of you guys know, but or noticed, we made a blog post where we showed some UI mockups a little while ago. So this was some UI mockup that the Wave designer made as to how we might consider redesigning Wave. This was made around Christmas time. While Wave was working. No one was actually intending to implement any of this stuff, but I really, really liked it, and I was working as an intern at the time. So I thought it was cool. So so we've now opened these mocks up, and yeah, isn't it pretty? Isn't it nice? So I managed to strong arm one of my friends into making making this, which doesn't look very good at this resolution, but this is a HTML mockup of exactly that, of that redesign. I've kind of changed around how this bar works. We need to clean up the CSS a little bit, but yeah, but like it's all sort of nice. And if I can convince people who know Gwt enough, and maybe myself, I reckon it'd be really nice to get a design like this into Wave in a Box and actually make it look really pretty. So we could take this and then put obviously the undercurrent Wave client, Wave panel into the box. So yeah. So that's what I wanted to show you guys. Cool. Thanks. All right, so I'm going to talk about authentication. So the way authentication works, so I've implemented authentication in Wave in a Box, and it's reasonably simple. So if I pull up my locally running Wave in a Box instance, which I think is still running, I hope it is. Yeah. Server. That's not good. All right, so I can log in. So this is the login box, the standard authentication box. We tossed and turned, like we thought about doing some kind of crazy authentication system, but eventually settled on just really, really standard. You've got a web app login. So the way this works is when you log in, you get a cookie. The cookie has a hash code, which is, the cookie is in a hash on the server, and in every request, it looks up the hash, and that's how I can tell which user you're logged in as. Really simple stuff. So if I ask Chrome to inspect this, I can look at the storage, and I've got no cookies. And if I sign in, then what this page does, will store a cookie with the Java session. JD does that for us, and then it'll redirect. So yeah, if I go back to the authentication page, then we can also, the page also supports redirect URLs. So if at any pages or any servlets you guys decide to make, you want authentication, then if the user's not authenticated, you can bounce the user to the authentication page, specify a redirect URL. If they are authenticated, or once they're authenticated, it'll just redirect straight back to wherever you came from. So really, really simple thing. Yeah, I assume everyone's seen this before. Nothing new. It's all standard and quite boring. So I want to show you guys how it works on the server side, specifically because I think a lot of people want to, think about deploying the stuff in the enterprise. And if you were to deploy it in the enterprise, obviously you probably want to use single sign-on, use smart card authentication, use LDAP or whatever you want to do. And we've designed it to make it reasonably easy for you guys to do that. But there's a few bits and pieces that you need to understand. So I made a slide deck, and by slide deck I mean I have a slide, which I'll show you. Really big. So for server-side authentication, we are using Java's JAS, which stands for Java Authentication and Authorization Service, or security something. Anyway, it's Java's, it's a standard way to do authentication stuff with Java. There's three concepts that you need to understand. Is this better? Yes. There's three concepts you need to understand JAS and anything based on it. And these three concepts are the idea of a subject, a principal, and a login module. And they're all reasonably simple. The subject is just the person, so that's you or me or whatever. The principal is where it gets more interesting. The principal is the rights that you have. So, for example, I've got a GitHub account, and I'm the subject when I log into GitHub, and the principal on GitHub is the access to the Joseph G GitHub account. So that's what the principal means. It's like your access. So if you've got an Active Directory server, then your principal is that you've got a valid login on the Active Directory server. And finally, there's the idea of a login module, and a login module just provides a principal to a subject. So the login module, so if you log into a login module, the login module will say, hey, to log in, I'm going to need your Active Directory account name and domain and so on, and password. And then if you provide it that, then the login module will provide the subject that you've given it with the principal to whatever account that you've specified. And that's JAS. That's the theory behind it. So the way it's implemented in the server is really sort of as simple as we could possibly make it. Resolution. There's a config file which is called jas.config. It just exists in the root directory of the server. This is a standard JAS thing. So if you Google like JAS example, config file or something, you'll get a whole bunch of different files. The file specifies, first of all, that this is it's wave that you're logging into, so that must stay the same. Then it specifies the class name, fully qualified class name for the login module that you want to use for your application. In this case, I've got a custom account store login module, and the account store login module pulls up your user from the database and then checks your password. That's all it does. But if you want to have an LDAP-based login module or something, then it's reasonably easy. All you need to do is swap that out for either your own LDAP-based login module or one that Sun's provided. And after that, you can specify some options. So if you're using Active Directory, then you specify the domain and, I think a shared secret with the LDAP provider or something. There's Kerberos login modules. There's login modules for all sorts of different things. And I hope somebody feels game to make a login module that'll work with XMPP. And it might just have to do something horrible like just trying to log in as the user that you've connected as to the local XMPP server and then disconnect immediately, but just to see if that user is valid, since there's no easy way to do authentication through XMPP. But if something like that happened, it would mean that Jabber integration would work a lot better. And if you're using a Jabber server, then your Wave users would also be Jabber users, and it would just work seamlessly. Anyway, so you can specify the login module, and then you say that it's required because users have to log into that module to be able to log in, and I've turned on debugging. So that's the JAS config file. So I haven't actually played around with changing this. I don't have an Active Directory server handy. I haven't done the XMPP bits. So if anyone feels game, and please, somebody feel game, multiple people feel game, play around with this stuff. It should be pretty easy to do. Then that'd be wonderful. So the login module is here, and almost all of this stuff's boilerplate. So if you go like example JAS login module, you get almost this exact same class, but with a couple of things changed. And the main paydirt is this login function. And so for this login module, all it says is, we're going to need a name and a password. So the login module is given an object that it can query for the name and the password. And this object's populated from the post data that the user sends. It says ask the login data for the username and password, and then it goes through a series of steps where it tries to grab the user account out of the account store, make sure that it's a human and not a robot, and then checks that the password matches. And if it does, the user logs in. So there's really only two classes you need to know to understand authentication. There's that one, and there's Authentication Servlet, which does all of the actual work. And this class does the whole login page, and most of it's really, really simple. DoPost is the actual method that logs in, and all it really does is call login, and login throws an exception if you're not logged in, or if your credentials are bad. So if I jump to that, the login method is quite simple. It pulls out the parameters. It creates an HTTP request-based callback handler, which is just a little custom class to wrap the username and password, how JAS expects. And then it creates a context for the login module stuff to happen in, which is just a JAS thing. So I've said we're using Wave. It pulls in the configuration file that was, that's the JAS config. It gives the username and password. It shows the the subject that we've created, which is for the user that we're creating, and then it tries to log in. And when it does that, it grabs this context object and pulls the subject back out of it. And with the subject, there's one final function that you need to understand, which is that it calls this get logged in user. So once the subject's logged in, the subject will have the principals that it's been given by the login module. So the user's logged in, and in this case, the login module will give it you've logged in with a valid Wave account, using the data store principal. But if you were using say LDAP, Active Directory, then it would give you a principal that's an Active Directory principal. This method grabs the principal and then tries to reverse engineer it and turn it back into a user ID, which is valid on the Wave server. And that's really, really simple. It searches through the principals for one that's a participant principal, which is the principal that we made for this, and then converts that back into an address. So yeah, I would be delighted if an outcome of this talk, if one of you guys, or if you feel like it, be game, screw around with this code, add in, try and make it work with JAS, with LDAP, try and make it work with Kerberos. You might need to make a modification to this function to make it understand different kinds of principals for the different login modules, and you may also need to up here make it so that when it gets the logged in address, say if you're using Active Directory, there might not already be a user in the account store, which is a Wave specific thing. So you might have to add the user as well. But once it does that, it's really simple, and it just adds it adds the user to a session manager, which just means basically that everything else knows that that user's logged in using that cookie, and Jetty provides all of the cookie management stuff. So that's how authentication works for the client, for the web client. There's one other simple thing that you need to understand, and when I say simple, it's a bit dodgy and it's a bit hacky, and I'm sorry about this. And a couple of people have touched on it already because it's nasty. So when I was designing all of this, I was hoping that all the browsers would support the modern WebSocket draft, and when they connected via the WebSocket connection, they would pass in the cookie that they've been provided by Jetty straight into the backend. Unfortunately, this is something that wasn't provided in previous drafts, and none of the current browsers actually support doing this. So none of the browsers will send the cookie in the WebSocket connection. So as a workaround, I've hacked up a way to make it so that the client pulls the cookie token back out of the, pulls it up using JavaScript. It grabs its cookie and it sends it using a message on the RPC bus once the WebSocket connection is established. I'd prefer to be able to take this out if we could, but I don't know when or if that'll ever happen. But that's how, the WebSocket connection is currently authenticated. If people have better ideas on how to do that, then I'd be open to things that aren't quite so nasty. And yeah, that'd be good. Are there any questions? No, really? Come on, one. Someone, put up your hand. Does that all make sense then? I went through it really quickly. Yeah, you guys happy? All right, cool. Thanks. Yeah, so play around, ask me any questions. I'm here all week. So. Sorry? Yeah, try the wheel.